Bonjour, Véronique, Véro, showing you La Belle France. I'm sure you're surprised by this architecture. We are not in Paris anymore. I am spending a few days in Lille, the beautiful city in northern France, very close to Belgium, that is often referred to as the capital of Flanders. I am doing a live stroll on New Year's Eve. The replay will be available on YouTube. So my plan with this video is to take you to sections of Le Vieux Lille, the old town, that you may not see during the live stroll. You can already tell the city has pretty unique architecture, and we will have time to explore some of that, as well as the history of Lille. If you do not know me, my friends call me Véro. I am a French native, originally from Toulouse. I have lived in quite a few cities in France in my life, and in the United States, in Seattle, for 2 decades. Lille is one of the cities I lived in. I was a child when I lived here many, many years ago, but I always enjoy returning here. Very fond memories of life in Le Nord, northern France, for my family. We are now in the somewhat oldest part of town, and we are entering La Rue de la Monnaie. La Monnaie because a long time ago, after Lille became French, it's only been French for about 350 years, the French king, Louis XIV, decided that the mint for the whole region would be here in Lille. And there was a beautiful building, a hôtel particulier, that was built in this neighborhood. And so the name stayed La Rue de la Monnaie. Now, Le Vieux Lille is pedestrian only on the weekends, or at least they're trying to enforce that. But today is a Thursday, even though it's December 31st of 2020. The cars are still allowed to drive through. I want to show you the beautiful facades in this neighborhood. Just a mix, really, of different architectural styles. And I will explain that a little bit later. Makes Lille a very unique city. The Vieux Lille has been heavily restored from the 1980s on. Not unusual in France to see entire neighborhoods rescued and saved from oblivion, really. You would not have believed what this area looked like through the 60s, for example. But today, it's a thriving neighborhood, quite gentrified. It attracts a lot of restaurants, a lot of fancy boutiques. And at night, it sparkles during the holidays. There are lights everywhere. If you know northern France or Belgium a little bit, we're very close to Belgium, the red brick is a sign around here, as well as cobblestones. This used to be a hospital back in the Middle Ages, before Lille became French. And it burned several times. It became a hospice at some point, an orphanage as well, and today it's a museum. There used to be a windmill right in that section, actually. Lille has a river, La Deule, and there were a lot of canals crisscrossing the city. In the 19th century, most of these canals were either filled in or buried because they were quite polluted and unsanitary. The locals had been using them to just dump everything, and so the canals disappeared. But you have to imagine the city after it was born in the 11th century, through the Middle Ages, with canals crisscrossing, walls around it as well. It was a walled city for a really long time. And like I was saying, the cobblestones, they can be quite treacherous, those pavés du Nord, P-A-V-E-S, the cobblestones. They're very slippery in the rain, and Lille is famous for its rainy weather. You can take a peek here of the local cathedral. Lille is a very Catholic city, has always been, and there are so many churches here. And the cathedral, La Cathédrale de la Treille, is right behind these buildings. It's very different to be here in the daytime, and I'm hoping this will complement nicely the live stroll I'm going to do tonight to ring in the new year, which we've all been waiting for. 2021 can come soon enough, so I think this will complement it nicely. You see these facades, very colorful, the brick, the stone that's been painted in that yellow color. This is an exhibit place. A photo exhibit is going on now. Of course, everything is closed. Museums, cultural centers, restaurants, cafes. But even then, you can see that Lille remains quite lively. People walking around, and this is something that's always been the case in the city. Locals are known for their conviviality and hospitality. They love to have a good time in spite of the weather, in spite of all the struggles that their city has been through. Imagine a city with a great strategic location like Lille, once part of Flanders, that region that covered what we know as Belgium today, parts of northern France as well as the Netherlands, parts of the Netherlands, and Lille became really powerful as a trading town, but because of its strategic location, it was besieged 12 times in the course of its history. And it was at times Burgundian, very quickly Austrian, Spanish, and finally became French in the 1660s. Here you have Au Merveilleux de Fred. You may know these delightful little pastries that look really pretty. They're made with meringue and some rich filling. It's a chain now, but they were born in this region. Here are the bûches de Noël, the Yule log, traditional. And this is what les Merveilleux de Fred look like. They come in different flavors and different sizes as well. They're very sweet. Always a line here or in Paris. Now what I want to do is take you through streets of the old town that I will not be showing on the live stream later. This is the Rue de Péterinck, one of the oldest streets in town. Again, cobblestones, and you can see this section in the middle of the street that you find in a lot of neighborhoods that bring back the Middle Ages. This is where people used to dump literally everything from the windows in the Middle Ages. This section of Le Vieux Lille, the old town, was completely in ruins in the 1980s when a very enterprising mayor, who later became Prime Minister under François Mitterrand, his name was Pierre Mauroy, did a lot to protect his city. In the 60s, they had a tendency to tear down old buildings and fill everything with concrete. That's what they did in Paris in sections. And he protected Le Vieux Lille and said, we need to be able to restore it. And sections could not be restored, had to be taken down and then were rebuilt. This little square we're coming upon now, La Place aux Oignons, the Onion Square, was in really bad shape when they started working on the old part here in the Vieux Lille, and a lot of the buildings had to be, well, rebuilt again. See more red brick. Lille has a lot of little squares like this. We call them Place, P-L-A-C-E. And this is one of the restaurants that locals enjoy as well as visitors. It's called Vieux De La Vieja. And they refer to it as an estaminet. Restaurants and cafes where locals, working classes especially, where they used to hang out. And of course right now it's closed, like most restaurants and cafes in town, which is very sad. But they do take out, so you can still come and enjoy their wonderful gaufres, waffles, and crepes, and some food as well. But who knows when they will reopen. If you read the blog post I wrote on the French Girl in Seattle blog, in January of 2020 about a recent visit to Lille, then you will see, you can watch a little video that I filmed right outside this restaurant and where I showed the menu. So picture this neighborhood completely run down by the 1960s, 70s, and then they had to tear down actually a big part of that street. It's called La Rue des Vieux Murs, the street of the old walls, and it refers to the old walls around the city probably. That they just had to tear them down and then rebuild them the way they were. So in Lille you will see a lot of houses dating back to the 17th century, 18th century, and then 19th century as well. And then some architecture from after World War I, because not only was Lille besieged 12 times in the course of its history as different European powers fought for it, but it was also occupied and badly damaged during both world wars. World War I caused a lot of damage here, especially in the neighborhood around the train station. So you will find as well some beautiful Art Deco architecture, buildings that came back after World War I, and they were either rebuilt in that style or they duplicated what was there before. So you have quite an eclectic mix in Lille, and it's really interesting if you enjoy architecture, because you can really see the different time periods. This is la Cathédrale de la Treille, Treille. Very unique cathedral. Lille had a really hard time building it. It started in the mid-19th century. They ran out of money several times. The world wars happened. It was only inaugurated and completed after the facade was finally done in 1999. So this is quite unique. If you are used to big Gothic cathedrals in France, you are in for a surprise here. This is a cathedral that blends in some of the Gothic architecture with very contemporary touches. The facade, you have to be inside to realize how they play with the light inside and the materials they used as well, including the marble on the front wall, and I will show you this in a second. At night it's beautiful. La Cathédrale de la Treille. See, if I arrived here and I didn't know where I was, I would know I am somewhere in northern France. The way the streets are laid out, the cobblestones, the facades, the belfry in the distance, belfries are quite popular in northern France and in Belgium, and of course a lot of red bricks everywhere, which you will find in working class neighborhoods or on other facades. Here is La Cathédrale de la Treille, and you may not find this very pretty, this metallic structure holding this front wall, but you should see it at night or from inside when the light goes through. What you see, this white section right here, is actually white marble. It's marble, and it plays with the light in a very unique way. So if you are ever in Lille, give the cathedral a try. You will enjoy it. I am going to take you through the street called Rue Bartholomé Mazurel, back to the center of town, La Grande Place, the big square, which you will find in so many cities in northern France and in Belgium, like Brussels, for example. Look at this beautiful door. Many people would not have bet on Lille 30 years ago or so, 30, 40 years ago. And like I said, this mayor, Pierre Mauroy, did so much to put it on the European stage, the French and the European stage. Once he became a prime minister for François Mitterrand, he made sure the new TGV, the high-speed train, would come to Lille, and that changed everything. Because Lille is such a great home base for business people and for everyone else really to explore Northern Europe or London. So it's very quiet now. It's probably 10:30 in the morning on December 31st. And we have a curfew, which means everybody should be home by 8 p.m. tonight. That will give me time to do a live stream, a stroll in the downtown area before going back to my rental place. These sidewalks will be much more crowded in the afternoon. But it's nice to see them quiet like this. So picture those lights at night when they turn on. It's quite magical. We are crossing a street called La Rue Basse, the Low Street. And you see this bakery on the left. This is Paul. You've seen Paul in many train stations or in other French cities. The chain was a family chain and it remained a family chain. It's now a very powerful group that owns brands like La Durée in Paris. And it's an international brand, Paul. They're everywhere in the world. They were born in a small town right outside Lille in the 1880s. So one of the oldest brands to have come out of this area. And you have some really beautiful buildings mixing the stone and the brick. Very often roofs here will be made of slate. And something else that's common in the local architecture is that the first floor of buildings, which is the rez-de-chaussée in French, or the first American floor, will be made of sandstone, so kind of a grayish color. And then as you go up on the top of the buildings, you will see them mixing brick and stone. These are quite old, clearly. Alignments, les rangs, R-A-N-G-S, are a big deal in Lille and in northern France. It's not unusual to see streets with alignments of houses, often in a similar style. And in working class neighborhoods outside Lille, in the suburbs or in the area in northern France, you will see the facades are made of brick. And a lot of the houses are very modest, very humble houses, and they look the same. So we are about to enter. Oh, hello. We are about to enter La Rue Pelletier, which is one of the different ways you can you can arrive at the Grand Place, the heart of town, La Rue Le Pelletier. Now, what I didn't mention about Paul, which is here, this is a pretty one. It's named after the cathedral, Notre-Dame de la Treille. But the most beautiful boutique here is the one by La Grand Place. You should see the interior. It visits like a museum. So if you're ever in Lille, make sure to visit Paul by the Grand Place. You will not be disappointed. So in the Vieux Lille, the old part of town, a lot of the boutiques are pretty fancy boutiques now. A lot of chains as well, French and international chains, and some really high-end boutiques. And that tells you the neighborhood has become very gentrified. And this is quite a far cry from what it was through the 50s and 60s. This was a working class neighborhood. And a lot of immigrants lived here. I love this street because it takes you into the heart of town and you get to admire the beautiful belfry, le beffroi of the Chamber of Commerce, which I will show on the live stream stroll, so I'm not going to discuss it now. And I will wrap up this walk on La Grande Place in the heart of town. Which, if you watch this video and the replay of the live stream stroll, you will get to see twice, in the daytime and at night. And I think it shines both ways. You can really see on this row here the sandstone they used for the first floor, or rez-de-chaussée, the ground floor of the buildings, and then the rest of the facades. Traveling around northern France, though it's not always a touristy thing to do for many foreign visitors, is a chance to really appreciate the diversity of France. Many people go to Alsace and they're already aware of the beautiful architecture and the traditions there. But northern France is the same, in a different style. And I think northern France has a lot of beautiful cities. So if you are, like myself, a city lover, an urban explorer, then do make sure to visit Lille and other cities in the beautiful region known as les Hauts-de-France. Arras, A-R-R-A-S, is another one you should go see. Roubaix, R-O-U-B-A-I-X. And of course the coast of les Hauts-de-France, the beautiful opal coast. So it's very quiet now, but we are about to enter La Grande Place, the main square, traditionally. As far as the city can remember, probably, this is where locals have met and still do. It has seen a lot of historical events, military parades, religious processions, and a big fair that's turned into a huge annual event known as La Grande Braderie, a big party, the biggest party in town that happens in September every year. This is the Ferris wheel that they have been setting up every Christmas for the last few years. This year it's not working, but they insisted on setting it up anyway to keep things a little bit more festive, I guess, for locals and visitors. You can see the chairs. Usually the square, even at this time around 11 in the morning, would be very busy with tables, with chairs. The cafes would be sprawling out. But not in December of 2020. Here is La Grande Place, which after World War II was named after a famous local son, Charles de Gaulle. President de Gaulle was born in Lille at his maternal grandparents' home and spent a lot of his time off, his summer vacation as a child here. He even had a favorite pastry shop, Merte, which is right around that street over there, La Rue de l'Esquinoise. So what I'll do is just walk around and show you the sights, and I will hopefully tell the story a little later of this square, which is the perfect way to really enjoy the eclectic style, I want to say, of Lille's architecture. The belfry I mentioned earlier is right there, the Chamber of Commerce. And look at these beautiful facades, known as Flemish Renaissance. They were really big in the 17th century, late 17th century. At that point, Lille became French. Louis XIV, the Sun King, made sure of it. And it was the first time in her history that the architectural style started to change. The Spaniards and the ones who preceded them had not been able to make them change, but once Louis XIV came in town and organized life around here, the styles kind of blended. But this building in particular, built in the first half of the 17th century before Louis XIV arrived, is a great example of that Flemish Renaissance architecture. It is the commodity exchange building known as La Vieille Bourse. Vieille because there was another one that opened. And it's probably the most beautiful building in Lille. Very Baroque, ornate. And those are individual homes or offices that were built for merchants, wealthy merchants in town. And it's in a square shape, and it's organized around a courtyard with a covered gallery. And ever since the early 17th century, it's been, I think, the most impressive building in town. It was obviously heavily renovated. I wonder if it's open now. It's not open yet. I will try and walk through it later to show it to you. So picture the square with all the cafes open, which right now you can tell, very different. Here's an interesting looking building. This one was built in the 1930s, I think, and it was the head office of La Voix du Nord, which had a different name at the time. It was the local newspaper, the most famous newspaper in this whole region, actually. And this roof line you will find a lot in northern France and in Belgium sometimes. This building has become the theater. It was erected in 1717, I believe, right after Louis XIV died. You can see this is a very different architectural style, much more classical than these, for example. But they all come together. Actually, it's very interesting to learn about the architecture in Lille because it's tightly connected with all the history of the city. And once you make the connections, it's fascinating to learn about. So I am betting that before the curfew kicks in at 8 p.m. tonight, we will have a lot of people out here wearing their face masks, but a lot of people all the same. It's very hard to keep the Lillois inside. They like to party. It's also very rare to see blue skies in December in Lille, and I lucked out, and so did you. We have blue skies indeed. By the beautiful Ferris Wheel that is here like every year, but it's also silent. It's not allowed to work. And to the left over there, you see those red banners. They say Vieux du Nord. This is the famous bookstore, the largest in France and one of the largest in Europe, and it occupies most of these two buildings you see on several floors. If you like bookstores, make sure to come to Le Vieux du Nord in Lille. Voilà, my friends, this was just a short stroll. You can find me on social media every day under France with Vero on Facebook, Instagram. All my guided video walks or tours can be found on YouTube. There's a lot of great content there. And if you would like to see more of Paris and France, don't hesitate to check out the Friends with Vero club. My club members get treated to a lot of exclusive contents, videos, live events, and so forth. And you can look me up on Patreon at patreon.com/FrenchGirlInSeattle. But for now, we will wrap this up. I am going to say goodbye right here, looking at the beautiful Vieille Bourse. Thank you for joining me in Lille today, et à bientôt.